Good day, my name is Scott Kinney with Discovery Education, and this is our One Idea series. Today I am joined by a good friend, Brian Lewis, who is the CEO of ISTE. Brian has been the CEO of ISTE, how long now, Brian?
3 years now.
For 3 years. And Brian spent almost 30 years, not quite 30 years, but 30 years next year in education, a passionate educator, having played many roles, including a school board member and a father who has kids going through the system. And so, welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Scott.
So, Brian, one of the things that you talk about is this concept or this notion of the human element of kind of change in the digital world. Could you talk a little bit about what you're referencing when you talk about the human element?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're all so busy and in our personal, professional lives, and certainly in the world that we work in and live in, that we forget sometimes about the fact that we're trying to do this as human beings. And we have folks all along the spectrum, whether they're the folks in the schools or the parents of the community or what have you, and we all have different understandings and experience. And I think what I like to talk about is the fact that sometimes we need to kind of step back, take a breath, and understand that not everybody is where I may be or you may be. I'm not where somebody else is. I'm learning things every day from ISTE members all over the place. So I think it's sort of a grace that we sometimes forget to give one another. And then the other piece of that I would just link to is we talk a lot at ISTE and do a lot of work in digital citizenship. And I know it's a major issue for a lot of us in our work. And I think that one of the things that I see, and my perception is that we forget sometimes as adults in this world that our human interaction in this virtual world, social media, what have you, speaks really loudly to our young people, our students. And if we're trying to help them understand how to conduct themselves as citizens, whether it's in their real life or in the virtual world, we need to set examples. And I would just say two things. One, I wrote a column about this in our last quarterly Intersect magazine from ISTE, and I talked about Stephen Hawking making a quote. There was a quote from him earlier this year, January, February, where he fears that aggression will be the undoing of humanity. And what I say is every community, including our own, real or virtual, has folks who build sort of a reputation for being sort of antagonists in the world. And that's fine. What I suggest is that in our world, in education, if we're genuinely committed to trying to set the example as the adults, as the educators, as those folks who are trying to support our young people, then we really can't afford to do that. Because if we're baiting people, if we're arguing with people in the social world, then we're really not setting the example that we supposedly argue is our commitment to our young people. So I think the human piece about change, about how do we conduct ourselves and help our young people conduct themselves in this digital world is a huge conversation that I think we need to pay a little more attention to.
So if I'm a district or even a building administrator and I'm thinking about how do I change the culture so that we can, as you say, as adults, provide that example for our students, what are some of the things that I can do as a district leader or as a building leader?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think a couple of things. One is just being able to talk about it. If it's on the list of things that we talk about, then we're more likely to be able to build some conversation around it, find some resources. ISTE, of course, has a white paper, and we have lots of resources. A lot of organizations do. One of the things that I love about ISTE is the community connectedness. You can connect with others who do what you do, who have done work in this area, and find resources for everybody at the district, at the school sites, tips, recommendations. I think it's beginning to have that conversation, make it safe to talk about what does it mean what does digital citizenship mean to us in our district? How do I want to be a leader in that? How do all of us collectively be a leader in that? And having that conversation, and like I say, connecting in a lot of ways, certainly through ISTE, with people who are doing what you're doing and figuring out what recommendations and practices they've put in place.
Is it more of a culture or is it more of a curriculum? I mean, I'm curious as to ISTE's position.
I think it's both. I think it's part. That's the human piece, right? It's a culture of saying, oh, wait a minute. I'm an adult, I'm an educator, I'm a parent, I'm a member of the community, and I just allowed myself to get baited into a conversation in social media about whatever the topic. It could be a sports team. And I posted some things that, I really don't think I should have posted. It was vulgar, it was mean-spirited, it wasn't appropriate. I wouldn't do that in my real life. It's a self-awareness thing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that has seemed to change, Brian, from when I started in a school system, is that how we define the educational community has broadened. So, we used to think of it as teachers and students and administrators, and I think today it's much broader, especially with some technology. It's parents and business community.
Yeah.
So, what is the role all those different groups play in this?
You make me think about when I was on the school board, we had a facility school bond election, and we had part of a Sun City retirement community in our district boundaries. And so how we talked about the importance of the school facilities to that audience was different than how we talk to the business community, for example, or the parents. Right. And I think that's part of what we have to think about is digital citizenship. If we make it a safe topic to talk about, as well as institute whatever components of that from a pedagogical perspective we want to engage, then we include people from across the community because they are part of the community. Like you say, when I was a kid, when I was on the school board 15 years ago, it was a very different world. So I think we need to give credence to, give airtime to the conversation and recognize that you're right. That community is broader than ever. We may not know they're listening. I could take for granted 20 years ago that there were certain audiences that weren't listening. I'd try to communicate with them, but I was in control of the message and the timing of that message. We're no longer in control. So you're right. I think that the community is broader. People care more. They hear more. They want to get engaged more. And I think it's on us to try to reach out to them in a real positive and constructive way.
So, Brian, you travel the world and see all sorts of great examples around educational technology and social media. Are there examples of places that you think either at the state level or the district level that do digital citizenship extremely well in your perspective?
Yeah, I think there are certainly places in the United States, districts that have focused effort on it. I think that's where we say, hey, look, we can identify some folks who have really focused on it and share that information. We certainly can share that and have resources on the ISTE.org website. But I do travel around. What I find is interesting, and this has been a learning experience for me, which is one of the many reasons why I love this wonderful gig that I have, is one of the things that I have found is that the things we have in common across global borders are much more robust than the things that are differences among us. The challenges that we have in terms of what we're trying to do for our students, the challenges that we have in terms of digital equity of access, et cetera, they're very common. And so I would say this issue of digital citizenship, because it's no longer just in my district or in my state or in my country, it really is across borders. As soon as you post something online, folks, it's there for everybody to see if they want to. I think that is a common challenge. And I think there are places, certainly in the United States and certainly abroad, where this conversation about digital citizenship and how do we want to conduct ourselves as adults is robust. And again, like we say a lot, ISTE is all about being a resource and connecting. And so we don't want people to feel like they have to start from scratch. There are people who have done or are doing what you're thinking about doing or you're halfway through implementing. Connect, reach out, find those people. They're always so eager to share their experiences and the things that they've done. So I think there are places where it's been a priority, where it is an open conversation. And like I say, half the battle is just saying this is a topic that we need to talk about regularly.
That's great. So this is our One Idea series. CEO of ISTE, Brian Lewis. Brian, thanks so much for joining. ISTE has been an organization that I've leaned on my entire career and certainly has shaped kind of my path as well. So I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. If I want to find out more, whether it's around digital citizenship or what ISTE is doing next, where do I go?
Sure, ISTE.org. It's a great website. We launched it about a year ago. We're continually improving it. There's great resources for anybody. There's great resources certainly for members, but you can get in touch with us, and we're happy to connect you with anybody and everybody you want to get connected with.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Take care.